Welcome aviators to another Motivation Monday. Motivation Monday is where I answer your flight training, aviation career, written tests, technical questions, anything aviation that you need help with moving forward. I am a flight instructor. My name is Chris Palmer. I run a flight school in Homer, Alaska, and currently visiting California. I'm held up in my room here because of what's going on with the coronavirus. There is a little bit of that theme today throughout the questions. And of course, it's on all of our minds. How is it going to affect aviation? How do we move forward with flight training? There are considerations there to make, all right? So, but we'll have a discussion about a lot of other things flight training wise as well, because at the end of the day, I think it's important that we continue on with life in some ways. We plan for the future and we keep working forward. So I hope that this actually does motivate you in many ways today. Let's dive right into your questions. Here we go for another Motivation Monday here at Angle of Attack. So, is it a bad idea to start my training now given the state of the economy and airline industry? Mike O'Clark from Burlington, Vermont. So, this is the big question right now, right? Because we have the airlines that are clearly having trouble with all the travel restrictions and the scare of this coronavirus going around. And I don't have really good answers for whether or not you should start right now. What I do know is that eventually life will go on. This isn't a disease that's killing everyone, and it is very, very serious. And I don't want to get on a high horse of any kind. I want to keep it pretty relevant to flight training, but it will recover eventually. And so I don't know what that recovery is going to look like. I think the government is definitely looking very seriously about stepping in. Today on the White House briefing, President Trump was saying that he would step in to help the airlines. He said that's definitely happening. Obviously, we haven't heard details about that yet, but I think that's very important in a time like this. So I have the faith that things will get back to normal. It's going to be tough for a little bit here, though, so I'm not quite sure exactly what that looks like. I would say hang tight for a little bit and see where things go over the next several weeks, and how this coronavirus settles down, hopefully, with our social distancing and things, and then reevaluate from there. You know, right now I think is a good time for all of us to really reevaluate where we're at in life. You know, are we really working where we want to work? Are we doing the type of things we want to do? Are we spending as much time with our families as we want to? We're gonna have some time to think about those things over the next several weeks as things slow down. And I would invite you guys to think about that. You know, maybe it goes the other direction and you think, hey, this is a flight training thing or an aviation career thing that I really want to pursue, and I've been putting that off, and now it's time to go for that. I don't know if that's wise financially or whatever else. I don't know if it really matters, but there's going to be a lot of changes that come from this that I think are along those sorts of lines. People making different life choices. So pretty interesting. All right, good question, and thank you. So this came up recently. Let's keep it a little lighthearted for a couple more minutes. Teaching the impossible turn. I think it is unreasonable and dangerous to teach the impossible turn. Even the most experienced pilots, it really depends situationally on if you can do the impossible turn or not. And so for those of you that are a little bit in the dark on what the impossible turn is, essentially it's when you take off and you're in your initial climb, you're only several hundred feet from the runway, let's say anywhere below 1,000 feet, and you have an engine failure. They've always said that turn back to the runway at that low altitude is the impossible turn, because during that process you can get the airplane slow, you can get into a stall, and typically people get into a spin and end up crashing right there. Whereas as a blanket kind of community thing that we've done for so long in flight training and elsewhere is, if you land straight ahead and you have control of the airplane, you have a much better chance to survive. I think it's irresponsible to teach the impossible turn unless you're an aerobatic pilot in a particular kind of airplane and you know exactly what you're doing. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're teaching people that it is not an impossible turn and perhaps an improbable turn. And I just want to err on the side of caution and say, don't even go there. It's interesting that this has a few parallels to what's currently going on in the world, but there's just no point to go there. All right. there are going to be plenty of people with less experience that have that one little thought in their mind that they can do this. And so they're going to make that turn and they're going to die because they saw it on the internet that it could possibly be done. Am I having a good day? I think I am. You know, I think the world is pretty fluid right now. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my family. We are in California. I feel like it's ground zero in a lot of ways, but I feel good about the support that is around us here. And not sure that we're going to go back to Alaska earlier than planned. We'll just kind of see how things play out. But, you know, we all got haircuts today. I got one. My boys got one. My little boy, who is 1 year old, he just turned 1 a month ago. He got his first haircut. So, yeah, you know, life is great. It was my wife's birthday yesterday. We had a wonderful and beautiful day as a family. So, you know, I'm thinking a lot more about those things that matter, and I just feel really grateful that I continue to get to do the work I'm doing here on Angle of Attack with what I'm doing as everything slows down, and that I'm not prevented from working and providing for my family. But the biggest thing for me is just right now is safety of family. So yeah, I'm having a good day. Is King School's course worth the money for IFR training? First off, I'd be unresponsible to myself if I didn't say that we have our own IFR training here at Angle of Attack. We have an IFR ground school. I think it's really great. I think it offers a lot of context that a lot of these other courses don't add. So I would definitely check that out, angleofattack.com. Again, this is a slow time, so it might be actually a really good time to go through ground school. I've even thought of suggesting that through, you know, my email list and things like that, but I really don't want to be seen as someone that takes advantage of what's going on right now. In any sort of way. But anyway, yes, we have an IFR ground school. I took King IFR ground school, fell asleep a handful of times while I was watching it, but it was good content. I think out of all of the legacy people, King Schools does do a good job. They are the Kings themselves. They are great teachers, and I really honor what they've done for the industry and think they've done a great job. I'm just more on the track myself, having created my own IFR online ground school. That things can be done in a different way and can be upgraded for the 21st century. So that's kind of where I am at. All right. But thanks for the question. Best online ground school. Just finished the free part of Sporty. Should pay and finish it. I'm gonna point you toward mine. I'm a big believer in mine. I don't want to toot my own horn, but this was literally the next question in the list. But yeah, we do a fantastic ground school here at Angle of Attack. I think it's quality. I think it's in depth. I think it goes a lot into the human factors and the safety type of mindset that we should think about when we're doing flying. I'm here to support you along the way, and I've had a lot of success so far with my students, and really just focus on each person. But I think you'll really enjoy it. So I encourage you to go check ours out. Angleofattack.com. This question, training on a Cirrus versus a 172. I am a big believer you should start on something like a 172. It would be like you as a 16-year-old learning to drive in a Lamborghini. And I mean that because, like a Cirrus is more of a sports car type of airplane. And you have to be thinking a lot faster when you're using something like that. There's a lot more tech. So I think that you should be starting off on something more simple. It's cheaper that way. I think, after that, after you get your initial experience for your private pilot, I'm totally cool you doing your instrument on a Cirrus, but it just depends. Major differences and how to choose a flight school, not looking into commercial. It all comes down to the instructor, okay? And the quality of life, if you will, at the flight school. So I think it always comes down to how good you get along with the instructor, how well things click. And so once you've got some things in line, once you really understand, what's in store in flight training, then I actually recommend that people take several discovery flights at flight schools around them, test it out, and actually see how things go. And if you feel like things go really well with that flight school, then that gut instinct is going to take you a lot further than someone that has a nicer facility or whatever. I think that this is a people business at the end of the day. It remains that way. And that relationship with your instructor is the most important thing. All right, hope that helps you. Having trouble with landings and getting a stabilized approach. Any tips? So Sweet Ride to Go. While I start this, I'm going to give you the opportunity in the comments to actually tell me what type of airplane you're flying. That's going to give me a little bit more context to help you out. But I'm just going to start with the assumption that you're flying something like a 172 or a Cherokee 140 or some of these other flight training airplanes that are typical. So while you put that in the comments here, I'll just kind of start. So talking about a stabilized approach to a landing, obviously, if you're not stabilized on your approach, then your landing isn't going to be that good. That's kind of the golden rule. So you have a 172, you just put that in the comments. So if you don't have that initial stabilized approach, then you aren't going to be ahead of the airplane once you get into the round out, the flare, and the touchdown. And that's just kind of how it is, all right? So in a 172 can be trimmed up and everything and have the power on and everything to where the airplane just basically flies hands off almost. So my advice to you is that you should be practicing the process of actually letting go of the flight controls and trimming off the pressures that are on the flight controls, and so the airplane just flies straight at the power setting you want or the descent you want, as is the case in an approach to landing, talking final approach in this case, to where it basically just flies itself. It's almost like the keel of a boat at that case, because you have some flaps in there and the airplane doesn't really want to go too much in either direction. It's just kind of smoothly going down the middle. In a high wing airplane, that's more of the pendulum effect, and with the flaps out, you're getting even more of it, where you're really stabilized. If you actually do nothing and there's not a lot of wind, you're really stabilized just going right down toward the runway. But the airplane needs to be trimmed. You shouldn't be fighting it. Power is your best friend, and what I say is that it's actually your #1 flight control. And the reason I say that is because if you are letting the airplane fly the way it was designed to fly, with some power and with everything trimmed and the flaps where they need to be, you should be able to keep a perfect glide angle or angle of descent down to the runway without too much effort. And so feeling that no effort approach first is super important. From there, you know, we could get into the complexities of what the landing is actually going to be like, but I think that that's going to be very situational with you and your instructor based on what you go through. But that stabilized approach, first and foremost, is the most important thing. And just really be thinking about that hands-off flying of letting the airplane go and seeing where it's trending. If it's trending somewhere else, then you might need to, you know, if it's trending nose down, your #1 flight control, remember, is power. So I'd be rolling a little bit of power there. You're going to see the nose come up just a little bit. But what you're staring at is where you perceive that your target of landing is going to be. Because if you add power, it's going to move down the runway. You're going to move up, right? If you reduce power, it's going to move back. And so by smoothly finding, almost imperceptibly with that throttle, smoothly finding where that perfect setting is and keeping it there and constantly adjusting it to where it needs to be. You know, not crazy. We're not doing this all the way down the approach, right? But finding smoothly where it is and keeping it there and looking for those little tiny changes, you'll get a nice and stable approach. So less is more. That is my final saying on that. Less is more, and that'll get it done. And then from there you can start working on your landings, because that's a whole other subject. Okay, hope that helped. Any tips from the same person? Any tips for retaining ground school information? You know, we always have recency of learning when we learn things. I think you got to have fun with it. I think we retain it more that way. I think having several different sources is helpful. The sources I think are the best are videos first and foremost. That's just the day and age we're in. And then following that up with book study, and then following that up with taking the actual practice tests. None of that is really going to stick until you are out there in the real world doing the actual thing, and that's where flight training comes into play. But my advice is to definitely get your written test done first, and then you move on to your actual flight training. The written exam out of the way is really nice, because then you can just apply all of that stuff to the real world, and I think that's definitely the way to go in your flight training. So I hope that helped. Doing it quickly first and foremost, and then just going and taking the test is probably the best way to just get it done and retain that information. And then you can plan on taking care of that later. How do you feel about CFIs and flight schools continuing to train during this time of social distancing? You know, I thought about this a little bit, because I think that to a certain extent, you know, we're still we're still keeping to some of the current guidelines, which says no groups over 10 people, no meetings over 10 people. I think it situationally depends on the type of flight school, and what your situation is. You know, if you have a big building with lots of people moving through all the time, it might be time to stop operations for a while. If it's just you and one instructor, and that instructor isn't in contact with a lot of other people, that might be an okay situation. Definitely an overabundance of caution right now is definitely the best way to go about things. I'm taking this very, very, very seriously. I might repeat this a few times, but, you know, I was up on Friday night until 5 a.m. educating myself on the history of this and where it came from and how it actually impacted areas like China and Italy. And it was frightening to me how serious this thing is, how out of touch a lot of us seem to be, including myself, and that it seems like we're in the Twilight Zone living in a movie and it's coming, right? It just seems surreal. So I would just say that erring on the side of caution is the best right now, but I've even thought of myself flying with friends, just me and them. But, you know, another thought is, you know, safe is safe, and maybe just shut everything down for several weeks and see where things go. Best way to build hours for commercial. When you're building toward your commercial, you need 250 hours. And you've got to get your instrument rating done in the meantime. That's generally what people do because it's an opportunity or a purpose in which to build those hours. But one thing you can do, even after you get your instrument rating or somewhere in between, is there's kind of this hidden rule within aviation where you can be a safety pilot in the right seat. Say your friend is flying in the left seat and they are working on their instrument. They are getting hood time, so they're under a view limiting device, and you are sitting in the right seat and you act as what is called a safety pilot. You are a rated pilot, you're current, you know, everything's current, just as if you could exercise pilot and command time, and both of you get to log pilot and command time. So you can split that cost together by doing something like that. So I think that's one of the best ways to build time toward your commercial pilot license, and can help you solidify or help you throughout the process of your instrument. You know, there's different ways to do it at different times, but there's plenty of creative ways to do that. So I think safety pilot is one of those things not a lot of people talk about, but it is legal and it's fantastic and everyone benefits. It's a win-win. So that's definitely something I recommend. I want to answer this question in a different way. What is the easiest way to reach private pilot license or your PPL? The easiest way to reach your PPL is the hardest way. You need to work super hard at your license. You need to put in the time and get that written test done up, you know, ahead of time. You're going to be putting in 3 hours of study for every 1 hour of flying. You are going to work your butt off. And then it might be easy to pass your check ride at the very end, which gives you the opportunity to get your license. But this is the main thing with aviation, is I never like to sugarcoat it like there is an easy way or a shortcut, because there isn't. There aren't any participation trophies when it comes to flight training. There is an honorable network of flight schools and instructors and DPEs, the people that do the tests, that this is what we do. We try to do it in a quality way. And I really do not recommend the places that profess they can do it quickly. Even if you were able to go to a place and get it done quickly, it does not make you a well-rounded pilot. So my take is the easiest way to get it, the fastest way to get it, is by your hard work. You putting in the time, a lot of it, to learn all of these subjects and move forward. I try to give you a leg up with the different products that I have at angleofattack.com, like our ground school and our check ride preparation. But at the end of the day, it is up to you, and you've just got to power through. My Aeronca Champ doesn't have a stall horn. What's the best way to mitigate a stall? So first off, the airspeed indicator has always been an indication of the energy state of the airplane. It doesn't tell you the full story behind what you're doing. But one thing you can do is get used to the other senses, the other cues that your airplane has. Sometimes I will actually disable the stall horn on the airplane. We fly a 172. I'll disable the stall horn because I want my students to hear the other things that are going on. It is mostly listening, But you'll hear, in certain airplanes, you'll hear a whistle, and you'll start to hear different buffeting in the wings. Different areas are moving around. Anyway, you can hear a lot of information leading up to the stall before you actually get there. I'm not sure exactly what that is like in a Champ, but you should kind of know, for the most part anyway, even if you weren't using an airspeed indicator, what types of things you can and can't do. Obviously, on takeoff and landing, you can stick to certain airspeeds, but you know that if you try to get too slow and you pull the power back and you just keep that nose level on approach, things aren't going to go well over time. You know, you're eventually going to run out of energy. Now, there's a buffer there between when you do that and when you actually stall. That's why we approach faster than we stall. Otherwise, you know, theoretically, you could approach right at stall, basically, and approach down the runway, but that's not a good idea because we need some buffer for, you know, winds and maneuvering and some other things we need to do. So, you know, just be vigilant. You know where you're going to get trapped anyway. It really doesn't change from airplane to airplane. Know how to stay coordinated in something like a Champ. Know what load factor is doing, and just be careful that way. But the real opportunity there is you're going to get some stick and rudder flying. You're going to be relying on a lot more senses than just waiting for that stall horn, because that stall horn in and of itself, just like the airspeed indicator, is only an indicator. It doesn't actually say the airplane is going to stall. It just means that it's an indicator that it might. And I find that actually the stall warning horn is fairly unreliable at times. And so I'd much rather be in tune with those other cues ahead of time. Quickly, headset recommendations for private pilot. You know, I have Bose headsets. I am sponsored by Bose, and so I have to say that up front. But I switched to noise reduction headsets about 6 years ago when they were just getting popular. And I have to say that I'm a big believer. It helps with the overall fatigue of a flight and the quality of the flight. I don't know, I just really enjoy having a good headset. I think it's one of those things that just makes a really big difference. No matter what aircraft I step into, I have a good headset that can protect my ears and make it a comfortable flight. So communication is also key. So I found that, you know, I'd be in something like a Super Cub working with a student, and they'd have David Clark headsets on hand that I would throw on because for some reason I didn't have my headset, like a fool. But then I couldn't hear him in the cockpit or the intercom. I couldn't hear air traffic control, couldn't hear a thing. And so I think that it even might come down to a safety issue of clarity of that communication, because communication is so important. And of course, with me being an instructor and having a flight school, between me and a student, it's that communication is very important. It's the most important, that transfer of learning. So big believer in Bose. I love their smaller style. They really back you up if anything were to go wrong with your headset, which is rare. But I just really think that Bose has the community's back, and they make a great product, and I'm really enjoying flying with them. So I was testing them out for several years before we ended up coming to a sponsorship agreement, but I really like what they're doing. So that's my honest opinion. Mid-IFR training, other than banging out the written, what else can I work on? So I think that the instrument is complex enough where it might make sense to go out with an instructor and just get like a mini crash course, introductory course on instrument flying. Go out and have them teach you how to do scans well. Teach them how to get you in a habit of that scan and how to control the airplane and instrument in some very basic ways, okay? Even beyond basic. Start getting into instrument approaches. Start getting into some other things that are helpful there. You know, I have a little bit more wiggle room in my rule on IFR and written tests. I think there's a lot to gain by having that 5 to 10 hours with an instructor that can really help you understand what's going on with your instrument knowledge. And so I think that's a good place to start. And if you do that, then you can start to practice on a simulator well by knowing what you should be looking at. You can go out and do dual pilot stuff with someone else, safety pilot stuff with someone else. You be in the left seat and still get some good work in. You're not building just bad habits. You're working on things that your instructor taught you. get your written test done, and then take all of that to your instructor and then finish off your training. I think that's a really good good process there, okay? Hopefully that gives you a couple ideas. If you need me to expound on that, I can certainly do that. If not here, then through direct messages. So good question, though. I think that's a compelling question to ask. How long do you think it would take to get used to electronic instrumentation? I'm not sure what kind of electronic instrumentation you're talking about. If you're talking about going from a 6-pack, which is our typical 6-pack of instruments, right, to something like a G1000, I think just having a little bit of context to start with is helpful, because actually the G1000 is set up like a traditional 6-pack. It has an attitude indicator in the middle, which is actually the entire screen, but then you have your airspeed on the left, your airspeed tape on the left, you have your altitude tape on the right, the vertical speed tape connected to that. So it's not necessarily down in the right-hand corner, but it's connected to the altitude tape. You have your HSI down below, which is your horizontal situation indicator. And then the turn coordinator is connected more to the attitude indicator with what is called the sailboat, is what some people call it, where you have the sail, which is the pointer, and the coordination bug underneath that shows you if you're coordinated or not. So actually, it's already kind of oriented like a 6-pack instrument anyway, but you have a bigger picture. So I really like electronic instrumentation. I don't think it's going to take that long. At very, very, very most 5 to 10 hours, but even less than that in a lot of cases. Okay, this seems like a well thought out question. What is the best way to ensure my time spent with my instructor is well prepared and used well? So having an instructor that can tell you what you are working on the next time in your lesson is very helpful. So a syllabus that they have, or if they just tell you what they intend on working on, a handful of things would help you study beforehand to come ready for the lesson. One thing I really like that my students do is, if they know what's coming, they can get a handful of questions that we can talk on a more in-depth level on that subject than just surface level, because they decided not to study. If it's surface level, then yeah, we cover the basics, but I'd rather someone come with an in-depth question that I realize they're breaking through some barriers and some things that really help them apply that knowledge. And so that's really helpful. Technology can help a lot now. So if you have the ability with audio to record your lesson, especially from behind, and then review that between lessons, you're going to retain it a lot better. And because it's you, you'll understand everything you did, everything you thought and felt, but be able to see it without the stress of performing, and that can be really helpful. You know, there are a handful of different things, but really they all boil down to you being prepared and you putting in the time outside of flying in the airplane. You know, for some people, and I think this is the exception and not the rule, but for some people it's easy to just go and throw money at an instructor and an airplane and feel like they should do all the work. But really there is a lot of work that is involved in you succeeding here, all right? So good question. Do I think there will be a GA restriction with the current coronavirus situation? I don't think so. I think that that here in the United States, there's going to be mostly self-policing in this, and on a small scale, I don't see how general aviation is really going to affect that. Now, I could see that maybe a little bit more for something like jets, but I don't know. Everything's on the table right now. Anything could happen. If we're all really disciplined, this is going to be short. If we're not disciplined, it could be a long process. So part of me just says, let's be as careful as we can and shut things down and just regroup in several weeks and see where we're at and move forward from there. Is it worth it to pay a little more for a nicer flight school, CFIs with more hours, better maintenance on planes? The thing that sticks out to me there is the CFIs. If the CFIs are better and they have more experience and they are going to get you a better result, that $10 to $20 that might be the difference in that hourly rate could actually save you a lot of money in the long run. Rather than going to a school that could waste your time and money because they're inefficient or the airplanes are down or whatever, it could actually cost you a lot more money long term because of that. But the CFI, again, I answered a question like this earlier. The CFI is always the biggest thing. You need to make sure that your CFI clicks with you, that you guys understand each other, that you have a mutual respect, and there's some good, there's just some good jujus there, okay? And that's the most important thing more than anything else. So it sounds like you might be onto something. I would say go with your gut, and it should all work out. So yeah, there you go. CFIs. A good CFI is the key to all of this. Of course, you as a good student, that is key to it as well. What could happen if regular small-sized flight schools closed? You know, I'm no oracle. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't really know where the flight training industry is going. I don't know where the airlines are going. But there is this part of me that is optimistic and says, you know, we're kind of all in this together now. And if we work at it, then we're going to be able to rebound from this happening. We're going to get right back into what we were doing and hopefully have a greater respect for each other and life. And I'm hoping that that's is the case and what happens. But there will be fallout from this. I'm not sure exactly what that is. And there will be companies that go bankrupt. You know, this is going to be a tough process, but right now I just want to make sure everyone's safe. I want to make sure everyone understands that they can keep themselves safe by following the rules that the professionals and authorities out there are saying to do. This is real. So yeah, so let's reevaluate that in several weeks. I'm not sure exactly where it's going, but it'll all work out in the end. Other schools will pick up the slack if that's what happens. You know, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for this to recover. So we just gotta keep working at it, guys. Commercial done. How did you go about getting your CFI? Do you have any tips looking back on how to approach it? That whatever it gets cut out there, that would help me. Here's the thing, and I actually did another podcast on this particular subject about doing your CFI training. In fact, I can probably bring it up on my computer here really quick and give you an actual number. But if you go to aviatorcast.com, which will take you to my website, my podcast, you can also find the podcast playlist on the Angle of Attack YouTube there. But that has a lot of different subjects like this for different licenses that you would go through. Just trying to find the CFI one here. Episode 128, okay, AviatorCast 128. You can find AviatorCast again on YouTube, but it is a podcast, so you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, pretty much any podcast platform you have. It all kind of gets gathered into any podcast platform. But here's the deal. You've gone through 3 different licenses now, private, instrument, commercial. And you have a set of maneuvers that you do, and you have to do them a certain way, and they have all the guidelines on how to do that in the ACS. And, you know, it's almost like you have a cheat sheet on how to do everything. And while there are guidelines when it comes to CFI, you have your fundamentals of instruction, you have your written test that you do for your CFI as well. The big thing that people don't realize is that what you're being tested on when you go and take a CFI test or check ride is you're being tested on your ability to teach. There is part of this all that has to do with, you know, keeping correct logbooks and doing correct endorsements and building in the fundamentals of instruction. But if you're a good teacher anyway, and you've trained well, then you are going to do the fundamentals of instruction just naturally inside of your teaching. And so my advice is the best way to do it is link up with the local flight school that you can help out and offer to teach ground school, especially if you have a ground school rating. But if you're under the watchful eye of an instructor that can help out that process, then that is where you can practice, but kind of be practicing under their tutelage and get feedback on how you're doing and continue to practice the real students, because that language and that muscle memory of helping someone that's actually going through it, even above and beyond role playing, is very, very helpful. So I think live teaching people is the best thing you can do. You can't really get away with that in an airplane unless you go up with a friend who is already a pilot pretty much and kind of role play like you're teaching. But you wouldn't be able to do dual instruction. It'd mostly be on you to log the time. Anyway, so that gets a little more sticky, but particularly on the ground, that's where you can really get in the process of how to teach someone well. Lots of other things in between. You know, you're going to be expected to have lesson plans on things, and you know, a variety of things. But I think people forget the core function of being an instructor is to instruct, is to teach, is to coach, is to guide, is to mentor. And if you can start from that place of you being really interested in helping that student and making sure that they have success, and then going to the check ride and treating the DPE as if they are a student, like you really care about their progress, just how you teach a regular student, then that's where you are going to have success on your CFI. Interesting question. What are the biggest reasons people fail their private pilot check ride? I created a guide on this, or not a guide, but actually a full course called Check Ride Ace. You can find that at checkrideace.com or angleofattack.com. And you know, sometimes the check ride doesn't even get started because people don't have their paperwork in line. They haven't logged their flight time correctly, and so they end up showing up at the check ride, going through some of those initial, let's make sure this person is actually eligible for this license, only to find out that they aren't. That happens all the way through. Happens through private instrument. Happens a lot in commercial for some reason. People are very confused about those regulations, but they end up getting to the check ride and can't even take it because they didn't do things correctly. They didn't do their training correctly and log the time correctly, and so on and so forth. I do have a check ride checklist that comes along with Check Ride Ace that offers that. And then I have the study guide, which is for the oral portion of it. I would say the oral portion of a check ride is where most people have trouble. I think it's where most people are nervous to actually sit down with someone. They feel like it's going to be an interrogation. It's really not. It's a conversation, scenario-based, about how you're going to conduct business as a pilot. And that's how it is through all of them. And there are no surprises there, really, because it's all laid out in the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards. We talk about that in Check Ride Ace as well. And I really like to stay away from the word fail as well when we talk about private pilot check rides or any check rides, because it's not actually a pass-fail. That's not even what they call it. You may not do good on one part of the test. The oral test is kind of like, if you do it, you do it and you're done. And if not, then we move on. But meaning it's all or nothing for the oral part. But if you go on the flight test and say you just screw up one thing, then you can choose to continue the check ride and come back later after some remedial training and do just that one thing with the DPE, and then you're done. So it's not like it's pass-fail. It's not like you have to do everything over again. And the word fail is like, it's just too heavy for me. I feel like people are way too in their head about check rides. And I think that's where most people end up failing, is they don't have enough confidence to truly rely on their knowledge and who they're going to be. And really, you have to be ready to be a private pilot when you do that check ride, you know, because you're going to leave there with a certificate to do so. When you do your instrument, you need to be ready to be an instrument pilot when you do that. So I talk about all that advice and all those things and how they fit together in Check Ride Ace. But yeah, definitely check that out, checkrideace.com. We got someone here that says it's awesome. And it you know, it's not a be-all, fix-all either. I'm not going to pretend that, like, I'm going to fix all your problems with Check Ride Ace, but I'm going to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks and give you the tools so you can make sure that you get ready for this thing, because we definitely want to make sure that you succeed. Here's a funny one. This is just random. Okay, people talk about polarized and non-polarized sunglasses all the time. Had this question pop up several episodes ago here on Motivation Monday. Actually, gosh, there's so many of these. I think it was like 4 or 5 ago. But the thing with polarized glasses is people say that at certain angles you can't, like the screens go blank. I find that most polarized glasses these days, they block out, they don't block out screens. It depends on the angle of the polarization. I feel like they kind of have that part figured out. So I actually really like polarized sunglasses, and I really like them for even electronic displays. Depends, you know, some glasses just won't work for whatever reason because they don't have the polarization at the right angle. But I had polarized sunglasses that I used in a G1000 airplane for quite a bit of time, and I also flew a lot of IFR, and I just found that when I was really in intense light, like in the clouds, I was in light so bright in IMC one time, like they were actually clouds, and I was in the clouds, but they were really thin. It's like the light was refracting on every single particle of water, and I literally had to cover my sunglasses like this, and I could barely see and control how bright it was. It was amazing how bright it was in those clouds. So I have sensitive eyes. I'm just a big proponent of polarized sunglasses across the board, but don't hold me responsible if you get some that don't work with your electronic displays. That's not the biggest thing though. I heard that other people say you can't see the reflection of like wings in the distance for mid-air collisions avoidance, things like that. There is something to be said about that, because that is what polarization is doing, is getting rid of those reflections. So there is something to be said about that, but I feel like that's hardly how I see airplanes ever, is by something glinting. That's just me though. So take that with a grain of salt and just decide what's safest for you. Starting accelerated private pilot program on Thursday. Advice from me going into day 1. Not sure how fast you're doing it. I did talk earlier about how I'm not a proponent of these accelerated programs, but don't plan on doing anything else. I mean, if you're in an accelerated program, not sure how accelerated we're talking about, but don't plan on doing anything else. Eat, sleep well, take care of yourself, study and fly. That's all you're gonna have time for, okay? Nothing else. What effect do you think coronavirus will have on aviation in the long run? And as I said several minutes ago, I don't have a crystal ball. I want to present this to you guys and see what you guys say in the comments, but I'm kind of wondering what to even do with my own pursuits of what I'm doing. And right now, as of right now, I don't plan on being rash and changing anything. If anything, I kind of wonder if I should be going in the other direction and creating a lot more content, since people are going to be indoors more. Happy to see what you guys say about that here in the comments. But I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen in aviation. I just know that that we've got something to deal with right now that's very serious. I think right now our first priority should be family. It should be our fellow human beings, people around us. Then from there, we can start thinking of how to recover once this has worked its way through, and hopefully that the professionals out there in the world have found a way to cure this or curb it or whatever. It doesn't look like we have that ability yet, especially to curb it, and it's just it's a little scary how real this is. You know, it's real, and we need to realize that it is. The memes are funny, okay? I'm enjoying all the memes out there about the coronavirus. I like that we're still lighthearted about it, but please don't let that lightheartedness turn into being cavalier, because it is very serious. So all that said, I just have this belief that we'll bounce back, that we're gonna make this work, that that through ingenuity and us banding together as human beings, that we're gonna be able to figure this out. And we're going to want to be connected still. And we're going to want to be connected through aviation, which is connecting so much of the world. You know, I have this trip planned to Japan the first week of June. More and more, it looks like that's not going to work. That is a long ways away. But, you know, I just really look forward to visiting that part of the world and seeing the culture there. And I think there's still so much opportunity in aviation. I think all of us are eager to just keep moving forward with life once this is passed, and I hope that you can all be a part of that when we do, and we'll see where the industry stands. We'll see how the government helps out to bolster up the airline industry and help it out. But at the end of the day, we've all got to have the courage to get back on airplanes and pilot them, or you know, be passengers. So that's just the way it is. And I hope that's where we get. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining on this episode of Motivation Monday. Please like this video if you enjoyed this and you found it helpful. Please subscribe so you get future messages here on YouTube, and that you hit that notification bell here on YouTube. Now, many of you are going to be listening to this through podcasts. You can subscribe there as well. Spotify, iTunes, lots of different sources. And I'm releasing this on the Aviator Cast podcast recently as well. And that's how you can get a hold of us. That's how you can stay engaged. and I appreciate you guys being here for this. Keep up the faith. We are going to get through a lot of this together. We need to work with each other right now on more of a human level, maybe not so much in the cockpit of an airplane, to get forward and move forward. Appreciate all you do. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you throughout this process or any other time. Best place to do that is through direct messages. Again, hope you're well, hope you stay well, and until next time, throttle on.